In this first video for Lesson 8, we're going to talk about book design. I'm going to suggest that you adopt a specific frame for thinking about book design. And that frame is this. As professional writers, you will likely not do book design work. However, you should be familiar with the processes, languages of, and conventions of book design and book production, especially if you plan to work in editing and publishing. So you may not wind up designing book covers or page setting the content of a book. But if you work at a press, you might make suggestions about book jacket design. You might edit the copy on a book jacket. You might not wind up being a book illustrator, but you might wind up offering editorial insight into illustrations. For instance, fact-checking elements included in an illustration for their accuracy. And one of my favorite examples of this is a book jacket design for a novel that took place in Paris, France in 1865. The cover included a photo of this cityscape, and the designer had really carefully removed images of cars and replaced them with images of horses and buggies. But the designer left the Eiffel Tower in the background. It made for an aesthetically appealing, gorgeous book cover, but the book was set in 1865. Construction on the Eiffel Tower didn't begin until 1887, so I think you can probably see the problem here. And it was a smart copy editor that saw that and said, wait a second. With that context in mind, what this video will cover are some key elements of a book. Essentially, we're going to dissect a book. But a couple of caveats. First, we're going to focus in this lesson on print artifacts, that is, bound print books. For Lesson 10, we'll talk a bit more about digital books, ebooks, books with digital supplements, and more. But this week, the focus is on print books in their physical forms. And a second caveat is this. Book is a big category. There are children's books rich with illustrations and sometimes even pop-outs or different cuts of the page. There are fiction books, which are primarily textual without cues and dimensions we might see in other types of books. There are textbooks, which serve specific audiences, context, and purposes. There are books that rage against what a book conventionally is and work deliberately to rupture what we think of as a book. And one of my favorite examples of this is by David Byrne. He's the lead singer of the Talking Heads and an amazing graphic designer. One of his books, Your Action World, Winners Are Losers with a New Attitude, fractures our expectations of what a book is. It's an absolutely huge book. It's plastic bound. These are some of the interior initial pages. Not what we typically expect to see in a book. In very, very tiny white letters at the far, far, far bottom right of the page, one word is included. McDonald's. Later in the book, Byrne composes a graphic story using the fairly cliché stock photography we're all so used to seeing. Even further in, he includes this page layout. A blank blue page, and then before and after images. Another example that uses text to disrupt our idea of what a book is and how it should look is Mark Danielewski's House of Leaves, where the text moves across pages, breaks in odd ways, and the storyline is visually deconstructed through the design of the book. This is the opening page of the book. This is not for you. And I know you can't see this terribly well. The detail of the page is really interesting. If you go to Amazon.com and look up House of Leaves, you can see some sample pages there. Here we have the use of different color on the page, a ragged right alignment, which is not at all typical for most fiction books. There's the inclusion of color for certain words. Later, he bounces between typefaces and includes odd characters that serve as notes and references. Even later in the book, long threads of text with almost no break except for the use of ellipses. The books that we're going to focus on here and those that are those that emerge from a traditional Western literary mindset and orientation. If you've ever seen a codex, for instance, like this, or a book written in Japanese, like this, or a page in Arabic where the orientation of the page and the the reader are different. You're well aware of what we privilege in the Western world. And books take on different shapes and forms and meanings depending on the discipline they're written from within and the work they need to do. Okay, with that in mind, I'm going to share a somewhat randomly grabbed nonfiction book. I just grabbed it off my bookshelf. It's aimed at primarily an academic audience, and we're going to dissect it. Historically, book covers were blank or very simple. They served one function: to allow the buyer to get a book home without getting it dirty. We still use book covers for most fiction hardcover titles, but we switched to book jackets for most softcover books. And the work that book jackets do is pretty important. For this discussion, I grabbed a book off my bookshelf called Working with Multimodality: Rethinking Literacy in a Digital Age by Jennifer Rousseau, published in 2013 by Routledge. The cover includes three parts that we're going to look at: the front cover, which you see here, the spine, and the back cover. The front cover always includes the title of the book and the author's name, and usually includes some design elements or graphics to draw readers' attention and give some clues about the book's content. Usually the publisher's name or logo appears somewhere on the cover. I really like this cover design. The bright, vibrant colors are eye-catching, and the graphic content complements the focus of the book, which is making meaning with different modes, including writing, audio, and more, across different digital spaces. Here's a scan of the entire book jacket, and I know it's a little bit fuzzy, but we're just kind of looking at big picture conventions. The spine has really important work to do. It got compressed because I had to squish and flatten the book to scan it. But the spine, if a book is on a shelf without its front cover facing forward, the spine has to grab readers' eyes and intrigue them enough to pull the book off the shelf and look at the cover. And this spine includes a vibrant green and a pop of orange. Typically, the spine includes three elements: the title of the book, the author's last name, and the publisher. Spines usually include some color or other design elements to help them stand out on the shelf. The back cover of a nonfiction, more academically oriented book typically includes a brief description of the book, sometimes situating information about the author. Back covers usually include blurbs or quotes from reviewers, usually experts in the field. Here she has two blurbs by James Paul G. and Gunther Kress, leaders in literacy studies. The back cover for nonfiction also usually includes a category in which the book falls. For instance, this book falls in several categories: linguistics, applied linguistics, education, and communication studies. The back cover always includes the ISBN, or International Standard Book Number, and the UPC, or the Universal Product Code, which provides information about what type of book it is, how it's distributed. It also allows us to purchase the books online or at bookstores. Let's look inside the book now. Again, we're focusing here on nonfiction. Some of the elements are included in both fiction and nonfiction, but the two types of books do include different info. The front matter of a book includes the inside front cover, almost always left blank. The next page in our sample book includes the same copy as the back cover, which is interesting and not very typical. And the blurbs from the back cover are also included on the next page. The following page is the initial title page, which typically only includes the book title, author name, and publisher name. On the back of the title page is usually the publishing and copyright information. This is a page packed with detail. We have the initial date and places of publication. This book was published in 2013 simultaneously in England, the USA, and Canada. There's contextual information about the publisher, including their mailing addresses in England and New York, and the note that Routledge is an imprint of Taylor and Francis, which is owned by the Informa company. The copyright holder is the book author herself, although the distribution rights to the book are probably held by the publisher. That is, they have the right to make copies, distribute copies, produce derivative work, and more. There's a copyright statement included noting that all rights are reserved. What this means is that all of the rights that comes with copyright are held by the author and the publisher. We can't reprint or reproduce this book using any means, quote unquote, now known or hereafter invented. There's also a trademark notice which clarifies that any use of the trademarks within the book are for explanation and not for infringement. There's information on the British Library cataloging information and the Library of Congress cataloging, which includes a brief description, 3 key descriptors for this book: modality, technological literacy, and Mass Media and Education, and the Library of Congress Placement Designation. In any library in the U.S. that holds this title, I should be able to go to the P99 section of the library's holdings and find the book. Although only the primary one is included on the back cover, the interior has the 3 ISBNs for all different versions of the book, one for the hardcover, one for the softcover, and one for the ebook. And finally, there's a note that the book was typeset and laid out using 2 typefaces, Sabone and Scala, by a company called Refine Catch. On the next page, we have our table of contents. This actually appears over the next 2 pages. This is the navigation system for the book. Not all books include this, but the next couple of pages includes a list of illustrations and where those illustrations appear across the book. We have an acknowledgments chunk. And then we move into the main content. The author has chosen to include an introduction. Sometimes authors do the introducing work in chapter 1. Other times they include a brief introduction separate from the chapters. You can see here that the first page of the introduction is designed almost exactly like the first page of the acknowledgments. However, when we get further into the interior of the book, the chapters begin without a running header on the initial chapter page, but the body is generously spaced. Here we can see the chapter number appears in a large font size, and a short, thin horizontal line separates the chapter number from the chapter title, which appears in the same font across every single chapter opening, and it's in bold in all caps. There's another generous break before the body text starts, which is not indented in the first instance. And here are 2 interior pages from the book, pages 24 and 25 from chapter 1. On each page, you can see at the top, the chapter title appears as a running header. On every page, even and odd, along with the page number. Across the entire book, illustrations and figures appear either anchored at the top or the bottom of the page. None of the figures appears in the middle of any of the pages. Each figure is labeled, and the labels match the list of illustrations from the front of the book. Body paragraphs are set with a subtle indent, except for when they appear after a heading, because the heading offers the visual cue that indicates a break. And to have a heading and then an indent is visually repetitive and unnecessary. Here we can see the 2 typefaces together. The body text is set in a serif font. The headings are set in a sans serif font. Level 1 headings are set in bold and all caps, left justified. The body text is fully aligned. Immediately following the last page of the last body chapter is a references section, which includes all of the works cited in the book. Each reference appears with a hanging indent, meaning that the first line appears flush left and the following lines are indented. I'm not entirely sure what style guide the publisher followed in setting the references. Almost all style guides organize references by first author's last name. But as far as the other detail, where the year appears, page numbers, etc., depend on the style guide. This isn't APA or MLA, and it's not Chicago. It could be a disciplinary style used by people who work in linguistics, or it could be the press's in-house style, although that's not conventional. After the references page comes the index. An indent serves to direct readers to specific people, places, events, and concepts in the book. So if I was interested in seeing how the author articulated the concept of culture, for instance, I should be able to look in the index and see the pages on which she directly discussed culture. Indexing is a science and an art, as you can imagine. You can't and shouldn't index every word and every concept, so creating an index is fine-grained work of determining key concepts. Technically, usually indexing happens at the proof stage process, where the entire book has been laid out, page numbers have been assigned, it pretty much looks the way it's going to look in print. The author or the indexer has a complete PDF of the entire book and can search and scan using PDF, using Adobe Acrobat search feature to find different concepts and find the associated page numbers in the book. Whew, we've covered a lot of ground here, and there's a lot more we haven't discussed. I hope this video, though, provides a helpful introduction to the elements of a book. The readings for this lesson provided some helpful design considerations. I encourage you guys to head to your bookshelves or to a bookstore and browse a few books, maybe from different areas and of different types. See if you can identify the pieces and parts we've looked at here and analyze the work those pieces and parts are doing in a print book.